Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Andy and Red. Let's take down the house lights and start the show.
Welcome, everybody, to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Crazy Rich Martians. The only thing crazier than love is Mars. Crazy Rich Martians in theaters now. Welcome, everyone, to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're filmmakers. We make things and we enjoy it. And then we like to watch movies to see how we can make our things maybe a little bit better or with a little bit more thought. It's useful for me anyway. Like, I don't know how much you like try to tease apart the music, but for me, it's taken me a while. Like for years, Todd, I wouldn't go back and rewatch a movie that we covered, because I felt like I stripped away some of the magic, and it was hard for me to go back and rewatch like The Social Network. And I was like, I'm only going to see like all the analysis I did, and it's going to be hard for me to enter this movie. And only within like the last year and a half has that finally worn away, and I can go and like rewatch a film and just enjoy it. Like, oh, throw on The Social Network and let's go. And it's a weird thing, that goes inside my head whenever I'm like, but it's so useful, doing these episodes. And I'm working on a story or revising and going back and editing a script that I wrote. And I've been having a hard time. Like, I really want to figure out what this moment is at the end of my film. And like, it's not 100% there yet. I know it's not. I know the nuts and bolts are there, but how can I get better at constructing this moment? And it doesn't feel like it's perfectly built yet. The bomb, it might go off, but it might just be a bunch of gas and like you might hurt your eye, but it doesn't feel like it's going to blow you up. And so like, how can I better construct this bomb? And so I started Googling like films about whatever, betrayal. I was like, oh, okay. And I couldn't find a good movie about betrayal. Like, as strange as that sounds, like, I feel like most movies with betrayal kind of start there. They don't end there. And finding a moment in a movie that's really well constructed that makes you feel hurt when a character gets betrayed was really hard to find. And I found it. I won't obviously say what that movie is right now. I'll tell you off the air. And actually, I'll text it to you so that you'll be a little bit more inside of the conversation that I'm talking about. And so I was like, okay, this movie is a really good example. The whole ending hinges on this big element. So I was able to kind of go through and like, what are the moments that let you feel betrayal? Like, where's all that setup? They get the payoff. Everyone feels that letdown of like, oh my God, this person really just got killed. And I text you the title of the film.
Yep, I got it.
And so I was like, okay, well, let's rewind and let me just watch the movie. And that was the first thing that I enjoyed. Like, oh, this is just a really good movie. Like, I get to sit and enjoy this now. And then just paying attention to, oh, okay. So it's not just, us hoping that this character does this thing, but they're building it. Like, oh, there's rapport that's being built. There's a promise that's being made. And in some of it, it's so psychological the way they set it up, because it's this character projecting onto another character. So let's say character A is a prisoner, and we'll call that character Bob. And Bob is locked up. And he's having all these meetings with Charlie, who's free. And Charlie comes to visit, and Bob is like, are you a moral person? Would you consider yourself a good person? And like, at the end of the day, Bob is the one that's going to betray Charlie. But Bob projecting these ideas onto Charlie starts to imbue all this morality, and like, Bob is the good person here. But it's setting you up so that all the impetus is now on, what's Charlie going to do? Yeah, Charlie, are you a good person? And so it just starts to complicate all these feelings, and being able to watch a movie and take these notes and start to say, oh, okay, is there something from that I can inject into my film? It doesn't have to be, are you a moral person? It doesn't have to be that blunt, but the psychology of what a filmmaker is doing, a storyteller is doing to make you feel these things in the end, there's all these levels and layers. And if you can start analyzing a movie or a story that says, okay, that's one thing. What's another thing they do? They make a promise, like you and I are going to go whatever, build a boat on Lake Winnipesaukee. Like, okay, now you're creating a vision. Like there's a promise that's being made by Bob. Bob is like, we're going to go do this thing, right? You're not going to let me down, right? And so the more you can set up this promise of a future thing, you now have a clear picture being painted in your head as a viewer. Oh yeah, this thing is going to happen. This thing is going to come to pass. And there's a dozen other things they do in this movie that I was able to like peel back and say, oh, that's why when Bob suddenly reverses, course and locks Charlie up and leaves Charlie locked up, like that's how I feel betrayal. And it's just the building blocks. And watching and analyzing a movie gives you all these opportunities to say, stealing is a thing that we talk about, like how to steal good. You have that Bono quote that you love, every artist is a thief. And it's such a beautiful idea. It's how you steal, because if you look at this Bob and Charlie example or whatever, like you can't just tell the story about a guy getting locked up. And I mean, you could, in some degree, maybe it'll be a little bit different, but you probably won't feel very good as an artist. But if you see those ideas being implemented, you say, oh, I see the construction. How can I do that too? That's a really fun way to go about stealing someone else's ideas and work, and then just converting it into how it affects your story. How would this look in your story? And no one will ever be the wiser in terms of, oh, you obviously took that from Bob and Charlie's Big Day or whatever. But it's a really, useful tool. And so I don't know. I love what we do here just for you and I, even if we didn't have any listeners, and thankfully we do. But it's so cool just to have these conversations, because I'm seeing something one way and then you come around the corner and like, oh, really? Because I thought this was just a story about friends. And I'm like, oh, fuck. You're right. I would just way overthought this, or my thinking was underthought, and I was just dabbling over here, and you saw the bigger picture because the story looked like it was a romance, but you were like, no, it's bigger than that. It's about friendship. And I'm like, fuck. It's so cool to be able to dialogue and bounce ideas with you in real time like that,
Yeah, I feel the same way about this with you, because like there's a lot of times where I'll go in and maybe I won't have much to say, or I won't have like a specific reason why this happened or that happened, and you'll do the same thing. You'll be like, well, remember this happened 30 minutes earlier in the film, and I'm like, oh, you're right, and it ties to this and that. So I think that we have, us and our listeners have an appreciation for not just storytelling, which I think that that term gets overused, but like filmmaking specifically, which is, they're the same, but they're different. You can tell a story, you can have a great story to tell, but if you making a film about that story is a totally different thing. Right. And I think that nowadays, especially, you mentioned like taking beats from other stories, or every artist is a thief. I think that, so when I get stuck making something, I try to make something that already exists, and inherently, all that does is unblock me. It allows me to not worry about making something that already exists, because that's my goal. And it just makes me continue forward. And in the continuation forward, I inevitably come up with something that is not that thing that I wanted to try to make. It's my own thing, because I can't make that thing, right? I'm me. If I make that exact thing, then I've just trained myself on how they did it, but I'm not. That won't be the final thing. I'll go in and then retool, retweak, and make it the real me, but you have to kind of steal, you're a human being. So I guess the word steal is the wrong word. Influence, to be influenced by. I am influenced by Radiohead. I am influenced by Sigur Rós. So I'm influenced by, U2. But I can't write what they write. I can only write what I write in the end. And I think that it goes even deeper with stories because there's only so many ways to tell story. And when it comes down to it, when it comes down to the thing that makes a story good, there are elements that should be present and there are elements that should not be present. And I think that in almost every good story, you'd be hard pressed to point out any story that doesn't have similar beats to other great stories. Any good story that has similar beats to other great stories. And yes, you can do stuff like Nolan, where you take the beginning and you put it at the end, and you take the end, you put it at the beginning, or you take the middle and you put it at the beginning. You can do all those things, but at the heart of it, there are certain elements that have to exist. And those elements are borrowed from other stories that have already been told, other films that have already been told. And the cool thing is that nowadays we have better cameras, we have better equipment for color, we have better sensors, we have better lighting. But at the heart of it, if you go back and you look at great films from 100 years ago or 80 years ago, they're great for the same reasons why films nowadays are great, right? So when you're talking about, like taking elements, I think that's brilliant. You're looking at your story and you're looking at another great film that has similar beats, and you're thinking, okay, what is mine lacking that this has? That is exactly what you should be doing as a writer. Now, you're not taking that and saying, oh, I'm going to do that. You're saying, what does mine not have that this has? Oh, it has this heartbeat that's present throughout the film. And this heartbeat, it manifests itself in the sound of footsteps. Okay, that's interesting. Maybe it could be a sound element that permeates throughout the film. Things like that. That idea is just a concept. It's just like an idea, but that you were inspired by, but you're not stealing it. You're making it your own in your own story. I think that's brilliant. I just love that. And in watching films, the more movies I watch and sit down and talk to you about, the more I love those little elements where that storyteller, that writer, that director, that actor took something from something else that inspired them and made it their own. And the beautiful thing about movies is that you have 150, 250 people, all different people with their own influences coming in and putting their inspiration into it. And it's a culmination of all of that. So no matter what you do as a writer, the director that comes in, or the actor that comes in, is going to bring their own flavor, and it's going to turn into something that you didn't even expect. And I just love that. I think it's brilliant.
That's so cool. I know we have a lot of artists that, enjoy our show. And to me, that's also really cool that we attract those kind of people. And I think it's for this kind of conversation. Hopefully they enjoy the rest of the episode, but I hope people really, enjoy whenever we're just bouncing some of this, the aspect of creating. And it's so, I don't know, interoperable, if you will. Like the same way that we're talking, like we could watch a race movie and use elements from that in a horror film. Like storytelling can transcend genre in terms of overlap. There's no reason you can't. Tension can be built in a number of ways, and it's really cool the more you can. I was listening to a podcast. I can't remember who it was, but they were like a horror film. Maybe they were talking about Stephen King, saying that his view of a horror film is it's really a different it's a different genre. Like it could be a rom-com up until it's a story that wants to be something else until horror is introduced. It starts as a rom-com and then something happens. And like, that's such a cool idea of how different art disciplines can interrelate and communicate something to you about art, because everything you just said, you were talking about music and we're over here talking about movies, and you relayed that directly into the next thing. Like there's no reason, a painter couldn't, use some of these ideas and inspirations of how you go about creating art as a means or method of being inspired of, whatever you're working on. And even if you're, just plugging away at an office like, we've done a time or two, there's no reason you can't find inspiration in, the darndest places. Todd. Fuck. I'm just out of it today, man. Vamp.
I totally agree, man. I think that we'll get started here in a second, but I just want to say to everybody listening, one of the things that I love about movies, my favorite movies, is that I feel something different, and my favorite music, they're just very related. I feel something different at different moments in the film or in the song or on the record. I might feel nostalgia, and then the next scene or the next song, I might feel euphoria, or I might feel energy, like I want to get up and just jump, or I might feel excitement, or I might feel sorrow, or whatever. And those are the best ones, that you're not just kind of like sitting there, imbuing what's coming at you. I don't want to be a passive viewer. I do that. If I want, I go watch like the Food Network or something. If I want to be a passive viewer, but if I'm watching a film, I want to work. I want it to be an experience, something that, a journey, an arc, something that takes me through. And those are the best ones for me, where I feel upended at times. I feel like scared, and then it's it's this tension and release kind of thing. It exists in music. It exists in film. The best films have that tension and release. I mean, Interstellar, we talk about it all the time. It's perfect at that, like doing stuff like that. There's all the best movies do this tension and release thing. All the best ones do. And I love that. I think that's, as long as that exists, then you've got something. If you have this tension release thing, then you've got something. And then there's all the other stuff around it that, you can paint with different colors, but
that's dope.
Yeah.
Nice. What are we covering today, man?
Yeah, so today we are covering Ron Howard's Rush from 2013. So if you haven't seen this film, go pause it and watch it, because we're going to spoil all the things.
Heck yeah. We're going to look at some of the cinematography. The contrast in this movie is dynamite. And so that'll be a short but fun conversation. Then, of course, we'll dive into some of the story and writing, voiceover, setting up stakes, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
A quick synopsis of the film. James Hunt and Niki Lauda, two extremely skilled Formula One racers, have an intense rivalry with each other, and it is their enmity that pushes them to their limits. It's created by Ron Howard, written by Peter Morgan, cinematography by Anthony Dodd Mantle, featuring Chris Hemsworth as James Hunt, Daniel Brühl as Niki Lauda, Olivia Wilde as Suzy Miller, and Alexandra Maria Lauda as Marlene Lauda.
Ferrari and Niki Lauda seem clearly on top, and James Hunt and McLaren are struggling.
So, 5 races in. How's it going so far?
It's fine. Just had a little problem with an Austrian rat and his team of Italian cheats who've destroyed my car.
What are you talking about?
Talking about the race in Spain that I won.
Yeah, in a car, which is not legal.
5/8 of an inch too wide. You know that doesn't have the slightest effect on speed. But you complained and your team have always leaned on the authorities. Now we've had to rebuild the car and it's become a monster.
At least it's a legal monster.
So you've had to resort to cheating.
You're driving an illegal car and call me the cheat? It's pathetic. Rules are rules.
Yes. And rats are rats. Thank you. Thank you.
Do you really think it upsets me, James? Calling me a rat? Because I look like one? I don't mind it. Rats are ugly, sure, and nobody likes them. But they're very intelligent, and they have a strong survival instinct.
Wonderful.
Marlene, komm! Lass mal den Trottel. No wonder she left him.
Oh, there's so many scenes. I picked that one just because it's such a good representation of you really don't love either one of them, but you also kind of do love both of them. And it's for that. Like every time you think you're going to pick one, that's the problem, is you never really pick one of these guys. It's because of moments like that. You get frustrated with how heartless and cruel James can come off. But then Niki will say something like that. Well, maybe that's why his wife left him. Like, holy crap, man. Like he just punches below the belt right back. And that's a really good rivalry that makes you, it's like they're in the lead. One person's in the lead and they just kind of keep changing who you like and who you favor. Like a good race movie, right? You're not really leaning one way or the other. I don't know. Did you see this when it came out? Or is this kind of your first time actually diving into this one?
It's my first time really, really diving in, like watching it, from a, not just a viewer perspective, but from a filmmaking perspective. I didn't see it when it came out, I don't think, but I saw it a couple of years later.
Yeah.
But it has been a very long time since I've seen it, probably almost a decade.
Yeah, same.
So,
yeah. What do you think, man? Does it keep your attention? Is it engaging?
Yeah, let me start off with the thing I didn't like, because it's minimal, I would say, and then we'll go into the stuff that I did like. I won't be long. I cannot stand the exposition from the announcers. It drove me crazy. It almost ruined the movie for me. Like, wow. Because it was constant. It wasn't just a thing here or a thing there, and it was all out of context, out of like, I don't know how to say this in terms of audio, but I know how to say it in terms of lighting. When you have practical lighting, you have a lamp on a desk, it looks like the light is coming from that lamp. Practical lighting, right? Right. But when I'm in a car, when I have however you want to say it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like,
it's motivated lighting.
Motivated lighting, thank you. When I'm in a car and then I hear the announcer, but I'm in the car, but I hear the announcer, it completely takes me out of it. I'm not with the driver now. I am from an outside perspective, cheating being in a car. It felt like cheating a little bit for me. Not a little bit, a lot, because they did it all the time. The entire movie, in every race, I get so much announcer. It's almost like I can't try to digest what's happening myself. I'm not saying it didn't need it. I'm just saying it would have been nice to have been more motivated, like motivated lighting, right? Where now we're back at the pit and we hear the announcer while we're at the pit, right? Or we're from the point of view of a spectator and we're hearing the announcer from the point of view of a spectator. Or we see somebody with headphones and then we hear somebody saying over headphones, oh, Niki just took the lead, or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that there's other ways to do that, and I feel like they just did not do that. It was just, no matter what, anytime you needed some kind of communication of what's happening, because I think in a lot of probably 80% of the time, maybe 70%, they needed us to tell us what was happening, because the cars were both red and white, the helmets were red and white. It wasn't like, oh, this guy's blue and this guy's red. It was difficult to kind of like tell, unless you were really paying attention, who was who. I could tell, but that was because I was like really, when the cars were about to take off, I would notice, okay, Niki looks like this, and wow. And then, but also, so they did a good job of like setting it up where like James had this kind of like bag thing under his helmet, and I knew that, but also they had the names on their helmets, and so, but the cars themselves, looked very similar. So if you're not punched close in, it's hard to know. So I think we needed it, but that just almost ruined the movie for me completely, to the point where I just wanted to mute it. And it wasn't done well. Like the audio, they're just yelling at you, the whole time. It felt very one level, and not, oh, it's coming from over here, and now it's coming from over here. Oh, there's a lot of echo because it's coming out of speakers.
It was just right on top. Yeah.
Right on top. Right. Yeah. Exactly. And so it felt fake. Yeah. That being said, now that I've gotten that out of my system, I absolutely loved it. I thought that the characters were really well written. I thought that it was immaculately shot. The cinematography is fantastic in this movie. Like, wow. Anthony Dodd Mantle. Oh my God. Like, kudos to you. And kudos to Ron Howard. I mean, the setup, the opening shot is beautiful where you just see concrete and then it pans up to the car. And I love how they start with the race about to start and then they go back, what was it, 6 years or something like that. I like that story beat or whatever. So we know we're coming back to here and then we're going to move forward. So it's a really good setup. Chris Hemsworth and Daniel Brühl are both fantastic in this movie. I can totally see why Chris turned into like this just giant movie star. He's absolutely fantastic. Daniel Brühl is brilliant in it as well. They both play their characters as their characters and nothing else. Like, you know, there is no influence of anyone outside of them besides each other, which is really a hard thing to do because you don't, you know, Chris Hemsworth has to work off of Daniel and Daniel has to work off of Chris, but nobody else. You know, nobody's changing James and nobody's changing Nikki, right? Except at the end when Nikki chooses to change himself for his wife, right? Yes. But up until that point, they are just going off of each other, allowing each other to affect each other, and that's it. So I thought that was really well written and really well executed as actors. You could tell that they probably did a lot of rehearsing together, you know, with this. I mean, even James, Chris's relationship with Suzy, he doesn't let Suzy change him. In fact, he tells her to go F off to New York, you know, whatever, and then loses her, right? He doesn't let her change him. But then even up to the very point at the end where Marlene is, where Nikki is in the hospital, he tells Marlene, his wife, if you love me, don't say a word. And he puts on his helmet. He doesn't let her change him. Right? They're the only two people that change each other. And then Nikki calls that out at the end in the airplane hangar. You know, he's the only person I respected, like in the whole world. So anyway, and then we get. I love that we get actual footage of them. You know, at the end. I think it's so beautiful. I almost watch movies like this, you know, based on true stories for that moment at the end. Yeah, and totally. And how I feel at the end when I see the person tells me how good the movie was. You know? Yeah. Oh my God, that's James. Wow. Oh, so cool. You know, oh my God, that's Nikki. Oh, cool. Yeah. Wow, Daniel did a great job. You know, he looks just like him or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, hats off to Ron Howard for that. I thought that the story arc was great. The beats were hit. It looked beautiful. The lighting was fantastic. I mean, this is a pre. Last thing I'll say is there is we've talked about this on this podcast. There is pre-COVID and post-COVID. And there is a hard effing line in filmmaking between pre-COVID and post-COVID. I can't tell you what it is, other than this movie would not look like this if it was made today. If it was made, and the line is not Netflix. The line is not pre-Netflix, post-Netflix. The line, I mean, there's a little bit, but the line is COVID. And I don't know if studios are spending money on different things now, or if budgets are too big and so they're trying too many things or whatever, but this film looks fantastic. And one of the reasons I think is Ron Howard is a master at what he does, but also like it looks like it was shot in the 70s. You know, you have so much film grain everywhere. You can tell that that he shot with the period in mind to make it feel dirty, make it feel old and dusty. But it didn't feel like a plug-in in Premiere. You know, it felt real. So I'll stop there because I really want to hear what you think now that I've said that, because we haven't talked about this film at all. And
at all.
Like not even from the point last week where we said, oh, next week we're going to cover Rush. There was no conversation at all. So how many times have you seen this film? Did you watch it differently this time? What do you think?
Totally. I mean, because same. I saw this probably like 2014. As soon as it hit DVD, I saw this, and I think I got it in from either Netflix DVD whenever they used to do that, or
you remember those days, bro?
I know.
Wow.
And I would get 3 at a time and like just chew through, because not everything was on streaming, and even this I actually had to buy it on Blu-ray. Well, I could have rented it, but I was like, I could spend $5 renting it or $10 owning it. And I'm like, I'll own it. And I'm so glad, because it is a really good movie. And I'm with you, man. COVID seems like as good a line as any. I don't know where that line is, but I think you're right. COVID is probably the most logical place to draw that line of there's something different happening between the before and after of the way movies are made, the way that this movie if you didn't know better, you might think it was shot on film, right? But it's digital, and they shot it on like a dozen different kinds of cameras, which makes sense. It's a racing movie, so you want crash cams that you can throw in a car and not be sweating over $100,000 of gear getting wrecked. But they have everything from REs to Reds to Canon C300s. There's a GoPro in here, just all over the place, right? And I love that he didn't care. He's like, you know what? Everything it's just tools. It's all tools. We'll make it match as close as we can, and the rest doesn't matter. And I think part of the benefit of this look is that you can do that whenever you're pushing the contrast so high. I mean, it looks bleached out. The highlights get blown in a lot of shots, and the shadows get crushed into black, in a lot of shots. Not 100% and everything, but he's not afraid of letting that happen, because that's the look of the era. And I feel like today, man, they're just fewer people willing to let the highlights get blown out and to push the contrast this far. Everyone kind of likes this lower contrast look. And it's so tedious to me. And this, I'm like, I wonder if I could build a LUT that looks like this, so that I could have it in camera when I'm shooting, because it's just beautiful. And it's part of it is because of how different it looks from what we're used to seeing these days. So I think a big chunk of the experience was just that. Was just kind of my eyes being wide open, trying to let in as much light as I could to just soak it up, But then you factor in those other elements, the performances you're talking about, so good. Before we rolled, I was talking about how Daniel Brühl has been doing it for so long. And yet, even after watching this movie, I still didn't know who he was. I was just watching this movie like, who is this guy that they got in here playing this lead role in a Ron Howard film? Because when I hit play, I was like, surely I'm going to know who both of these guys are. And I'm like, oh, I kind of know Chris Hemsworth. He's done a couple Thor movies or something. And maybe, I don't know if he'd done Black Hat at this point yet with Michael Mann, but he was a known quantity at this point. And yet, Daniel Brühl would still take a few years before, I think now people recognize him here, but it didn't matter. He got cast on talent, and he just crushes it. And I love it. He's just owning it. I mean, they did the thing with his teeth to give him that, overbite. And he just leans all the way into it, man. I was just gripped. The performances, and then intercutting all this racing. I didn't know, now that you've called out the announcers and that kind of expositional element, I wonder if I'll watch it differently the next time. Because I just took it as exactly what you said. It's exposition I'm not as good of a watcher in that way as you are. So I needed it. So I was looking for it. So I was struggling to tell who was whom throughout the entire thing. And so that was a lifeline for me. Whereas for you didn't need it, and therefore it stuck out like a sore thumb, which is really funny to me. But I adore the whole process of shooting this, because I wonder if they had done what you're talking about, like make it more lived in each scene, each shot, owning what the announcer should or shouldn't be doing. That would be a really different texture to all those scenes. And I wonder what that would be like. Because it's not like they took any shortcuts in this movie. Like, this movie is all about, we're going to the nines. Like, we're wasting no effort. We're going to get 1,000 extras and we're going to shoot all this. Whereas now it's like, how much can we green screen, and can we comp in 50 extras from over here and fill in the stands over here? Like, no one was doing that. I mean, they were doing that in Gladiator, right? They were comping in fake extras in the stands and all that kind of stuff. It's not like it wasn't being done, but it just doesn't feel like they were doing that by and large for a lot of shots in this movie. They took their time, they made the effort, and you feel it in your bones. And it's one of those things you can't point, in the balance sheet and said, this is going to get us this feeling. Like, it's just an extra layer of, we're putting the attention to detail in, and it's just going to add to the experience. It's a shrug. Like, I can't explain it more than that. But he did it. And because he's Ron Howard, he gets to do that. Right? Like, you and I couldn't show up and be like, yeah, okay, yeah, we can VFX this thing, but just trust us. The feeling, yeah, but that means an extra $100,000. I'm like, yeah, but trust me. No, we don't. We don't know who you are.
We don't trust you. No.
There's your answer. Asked and answered, buddy. Get out of here. What's his name? Bill? Presley? Presley, get out of here.
Presley.
It's Wesley, good. Sir. And so like you need a little bit of oomph to that, and we're just, I don't know, more and more losing that because of 1,000 reasons, right? I mean, there's fewer box office returns, but it's a bit of a snake eating its tail situation, because maybe the reason there's fewer box office returns is because you're making fewer rushes and speeds, and like you're not giving people a reason to show up. And the more you do this recursive thing of the only thing that makes money is IP and sequels, therefore we're going to make more IP and, based off of books and sequels. And it just becomes like, well, yeah, you're training your audience at a certain point to only show up for those. And Christopher Nolan, it's like, you're not going to get your next Christopher Nolan without giving your next Christopher Nolan those opportunities. And it's just, you have to risk at some point. And so I'm grateful to, Nolan and Ron Howard and these kind of guys. But my God, I had a great time, I guess is the end of that thought. Because yeah, the contrast of not just the look of the film, but the contrast of what we're getting today isn't this. It's just not, we're going to spend 100 days shooting this thing and getting all these inserts and researching and doing a real proper camera test and whatever else is going in, that maybe we're shortcutting more and more. I don't know. It was a lot of thought, but there's no reason on its face that someone should walk into an executive's office and say, hey, can I get $80 million to make a race movie about two guys from the 60s that no one remembers?
Yeah, right? Man.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. A couple notes and jump in, of course, on story and writing. So like the voiceover, it's always dicey to use voiceover because it can be a crutch, whenever you're storytelling, to be like, I don't know how to let people know what's going on, and so we'll just use voiceover. And I thought they did an excellent job of using it because they're trying to cover so much ground, and you don't want to add that extra 30 minutes of plot development and character development when it's not going to get you 30 more minutes of excitement. Like, this movie is about those guys being in their cars. And so the faster you can get us into their cars, the better. Because unless going back to their childhoods and letting us know how their relationship with their father developed and pushed him into being a badass race car driver, if it's not going to give us all these really thick, dramatic moments, you got to cut it, because this movie is about the rivalry and them being together in their cars on the racetrack. And so the voiceover helps us move right along without needing to set scenes up, right? It's quicker to introduce the stakes. Like Lauda, his family won't support him, so he takes out a loan. And it's just much easier to cover far more story ground while keeping us oriented. They can plop us right into that meeting with his dad, and his dad giving him the what for, and him saying, well, take your money and screw you, and you're going to regret it when you see my name on billboards. Like that, those are really nice stakes of he really needs to succeed or else he's going to look like an idiot. It's like we feel why he wants to succeed now. And we can whip right along with, James Hunt's story. And that's all through voiceover. It's just letting us jump straight into a scene because he takes one sentence to set it up. And now we already know the stakes of the scene. And then we get to see that kind of play out. And then we jump right back into the next thing. And really great use of voiceover. Not everyone does this well, even on this level. Even writers on this level. I've seen Aaron Sorkin botch this in some of his films. And so it's not about, everyone who knows what they're doing does it well. Not everyone does. And you're going to be hard pressed to find a better writer than Sorkin. And maybe we'll cover the film I'm talking about at some point. Just so I can say, this is why you don't do this. And it'll be a 2-hour exercise and don't do this. And we spend 5 minutes on it, but whatever. But this also does a really nice job of setting up the stakes later in the film. First, when we get to that, they finally make it to Formula 1 out of Formula 3, right? They jump all the way up to F1. In that first major race, we see a huge crash and we see a guy burning in his car. Like and we see how they both react to it. One, you're demonstrating the risk that they're involved in, right? And then we get to see, well, okay, but how are they each responding to it? Hunt, obviously, he throws up, and that's freaking out his girlfriend a little bit. She's like, what the hell is going on? And what does he wants to do? Hunt wants to cancel the race. He's like, we can't be here. And Niki Lauda, his response is, it was the driver's fault. He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, no, you saw the way he took the current. You can't do that. Like, that's on him. It's like, whoa. So you're introducing their character types and as well as how they approach racing in and of itself. And then has major implications for later on in the film when we get to the big moment. And so Hunt is ruled by emotion. Lauda is ruled by risk and analysis. And that holds true later when Niki wants to cancel because whenever they get to Nürburgring, sorry, Uwe, like, my name is German only. I have no German in me.
Yeah, your name is Heidenreich. Come on.
And but you get into the big Nürburgring race, and what happens? Niki Lauda wants to cancel, but it's because of analysis. And Hunt wants to race in dangerous conditions because he's ruled by emotion. He's gotten away from the feeling of the danger. It doesn't matter anymore. And in fact, even better than the danger, he wants to do something against Niki. It's like, oh, Niki doesn't want to go, then I want to go. It's like, I want that conflict because screw him. That's why. And he just sees opportunity, right? Whereas if he was smart, he'd be like, this guy only thinks in rational terms. And if even he doesn't want to go now, well, then maybe I should think about that. But no one likes Niki. And that's a really nice scene to reemphasize how him being kind of a wad is costing him something,
And to call out a thing, so this ties really well with what I was saying earlier of stories, no matter how old they are or new they are or whatever, have certain good stories have certain beats or certain key elements. So if Niki, if they were more similar, right? So Niki and James, if they weren't polar opposites, this wouldn't be as good a story.
Yeah.
They have to be polar opposites. James has to only operate on emotion, like you mentioned, and Niki only has to operate on reason and logic. That is it. If they kind of meet in the middle, then you don't really have a story. You just have two people who are doing things, and it's a therefore story. It's a not a therefore story. It's an and then story, like we talk about, with yeah. So So yeah, they have to be separate until the end when they become a little bit more similar, right? And they see each other's point of view, right?
Absolutely. And you can imagine in real life, this isn't exactly how they operate, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah, right. Yeah, of course.
Niki loves his wife, and meanwhile, like, he's getting married, which is also another great stake setup, because him getting married, he does it in his own way, right? Might as well be you. I've always thought, if I was going to do it, blah, 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 it might as well be you. And
it's so good.
It's so good. And his wife's response is perfect. It's gold. She says, a poet.
Yeah, it's so good.
She loves him for who he is and isn't expecting more than that, and that makes it really beautiful. But in real life, I'm sure he probably had a little bit more like emotional, texture. Like, hey, babe, I love you, but at the same time, I'm not going to be the guy. I'm going to forget your birthday sometimes. Like that's just me, And I love it. But the way they use that for stakes, because that could have happened at any moment in the film. But they said it right before Nürburgring.
This is great.
Finally, you get me on the other side of it. Because stakes in the film can't just be life or death. Like that's always a good baseline. But they're better when you know why a character wants to live. We care more when we know they have a reason for living. And they flat out say in the scene right before the big race, as we'll call it from here on out, right before that, they say that he's happy and that it worries him, right? He says, happiness is the enemy. It weakens you. Suddenly you have something to lose. Like they're just hanging it in bright, shining lights, his stakes. Like I now have something to lose. And she like kind of punches back a little bit. When you call happiness an enemy, you've already lost. So she's raising the stakes a little bit more like, no. Don't check out now. Like lean in and enjoy happiness. Don't risk your happiness. And of course, they're giving a new thing for Niki to weigh and a new leaf to turn over to try to learn to accept love and to value it. And he doesn't. And that's a really nice moment of him choosing to race despite calling out for everyone, right? And so we cut to the big race and immediately see another insane crash during free practice. And it's refreshing the stakes. It's replaying that same thing we saw when they entered F1. And now this was during a practice run. Like there is nothing on the line and they're still wrecking and getting themselves killed. And so they have a meeting about the dangers, right? We even hear it called the graveyard. And apparently there's been almost 70 professional drivers die on that course. And so they call it the graveyard, and let's have a meeting and talk about the dangers of this place. And Niki is like, under ideal, perfect conditions, this thing is a hazard. It'll kill people. And these are not even close to ideal conditions. We should cancel. And they choose to proceed. So we have really lit the fuse here. Because you can't have nothing happen here. We've had two really big setups, a crash and laying out. That wasn't it. That's not over. That's the beginning. The fear of more crashes is still present. Okay. And now after swapping wet tires, Niki is ready to go. And I love this little moment. It's such a free moment of tension because they're behind a lap already, right? Or whatever. They had the wrong tires on. They had to pull over. They had to get them swapped. And Niki has to catch Hunt, and he's kind of freaking out. And Hunt gets out, and now Niki's got his tires changed, and he's ready to go. And so we're layering all this extra tension in because right as he's ready to go, there's a guy that pulls in front of him that won't get out of his way. He's like, "What's going on here?" And so we're just like, what is this? We gotta go. Like we're just freaking out.
I felt like that too. Yeah.
Right. It's like, oh, and I love that. It's adding so much more tension because he needs to get going. We feel it. And what I love about that in particular is it doesn't actually affect anything in the race, right? This isn't in real time or anything. This is just an edit. Like this does nothing to the actual plot at all. It's just a free moment of tension because we know that every extra obstacle or frustration thrown in the way in the middle of a high stakes race just adds to the experience. We're in a race and we want to see these guys moving. It's just free tension to have him have to wait when he's ready to go, when he's ready to floor it. Beautiful, beautiful storytelling. And then he gets going, and now we know he's behind in so many ways. They screwed up the tires, and now he's even further behind, and we're expecting him to floor it and get going. And now they start to insert all these shots of the car's internals as he's trying to catch up. And you couple that with the audio, and we can feel the stress of the machine, and it's just building tension. Man, you want to talk about studying a really well-formulated crash and how to make people feel it. Like, this is just step by step. Like, you could follow every single one of these things and so many other different genres and film types and say, oh, here's what they're doing. Here's the mechanics of how he got me to feel so much anxiety when this car wrecked. And then how I'm so invested in watching him now burn. Like, you could have just set him on fire and we're still going to feel something. But you add in all these other things and like we're ready to scream. Like, watching him burning in that car, I felt devastated. Like, I wanted to pause and walk out of the room. Like, I just couldn't take it. It was unbearable. And it's because of this. It's because of all these things that they're doing. And then everything from there on out, like, you have so much emotional buy-in because of this, because of all these other things that they're doing. And so now you see him burned. Like, I'm trying to remind myself this is makeup. But at the same time, all these things, and then knowing this is based on a true story, you don't know where it's not true and where it is.
I mean, they said he was trapped in there for a minute.
A minute and 800 degrees.
And we were watching this, and I think he might have been in the car for like 15 seconds, maybe 20. Can you imagine 3 or 4 times that amount of time? Just, dear God.
Unreal. And so in the hospital, watching him go through all this, it's so visceral. Watching him try to put on his helmet, I couldn't. Like,
yeah.
I rewatched it today. So I watched it yesterday and was just, I forced myself to, I looked away, but I didn't fast forward. This morning I was like, nope, I fast forwarded through those sections. It's the only section in the film I fast forwarded, and I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this again. It's so effective.
What a great movie. What a great, that's just so good. Oh my God.
I've never, Todd, in every
never
other
do
film, ever, not once in any other movie we've covered, have I fast forwarded any section because I'm like, I need to just sit here, see if I can learn anything. And I'm like, nope, not today.
I don't want to learn anything. It's not worth it. Learning is sometimes too costly.
I will remain dumb. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's such a wonderful, all of it. The visual storytelling, the mechanics of how they're getting you to feel a certain way. And part of it is also just the way they introduce the characters, and we know it's based on a true story. All these elements are just so good. I would say, so if you had one moment that almost ripped the movie away from you, or one issue, I had one of those too. And so for me, it was the marriage from, with James and, Suzy. Like, that jumped blind. I couldn't believe how fast it went. It was just, they're having a conversation. And he just suddenly says, you don't fancy getting married, do you? And then we cut to a wedding. And it was just so abrupt, and they didn't do anything to set up that at all, other than they're having a conversation about cars and now they're getting married. I was just, what? I mean, it's based on a true story, and that was as far as I could let it get me. I was like, okay, I guess something like this must have happened. To what degree? I don't know if that can't be how that actually happened, right? But anyway, that was for me the only, like, y'all kind of jumped a bit of a shark. But for me, they also did a really nice emotional element, I think, before that, where Niki is trying to win his F1 card or whatever, and he's convincing those owners to let him onto their team under all these conditions. But before that, I love that shot whenever he's checking in and the track manager is like, yeah, and she turns around and he's like checking out her ass, and the camera pans down to reflect what he's looking at, and then he's talking to her at the track, and we see the guy, his other racer buddy, that soon to be buddy-ish, and he sees him, and I'm like, what was that? Is that like he's getting motivated because he wants the girl. What is this? And then he catches him in the hallway, and he's like, I don't think you want that one. And he's like, yeah, you're right. It's not your business. He's like, I'm just saying there's another driver, and he's known for being a rock star in the bedroom. And he goes all night, then all day, and then all night again. And I'm just saying, I don't want to follow that, and he's like, who is it? And he's like, of course it's James Hunt. And I love that because it's another aspect of the competition. Whenever you're thinking about racing, he is now looking to sleep with someone that James has already slept with. And it's like, he's treading in his tracks. He's in his wake. And it's such a crude, but really fun way to kind of edge up the rivalry just a little bit more. It's fun. It's just a little fun element.
I the one weird thing was like that guy didn't have a whole lot of purpose in the story other than to be really, I don't like Niki, at the beginning, but then we don't really see any payoff for that. So other than to deliver this information like, she was sleeping with, him, and she was sleeping with James. I don't really see the purpose of him being there. Them showing how like annoyed he was that Niki was even there, because then there's really no payoff there. So
the only other use of him, right, is the segue to introducing Niki to his wife,
right, because he goes to that party. Yes,
and then,
that's true. That's a pretty good payoff.
And he reinforces, I guess, also that like, I was trying to befriend you, but you're just an ass, so screw you.
Yes.
Which I think also might play into everyone voting against him, even though that guy voted with him.
That's right. He did.
He voted. So it's like it lends a little bit of credence. Like, we know this guy doesn't like him, and yet he's still voting with him.
for Niki. Yeah, voting with Niki.
Maybe there's the other thing and I don't know. I wonder if that meeting actually took place or not, because it's a really cool thing to have the victim be the guy who was warning everyone.
Yeah.
Because the other way I feel like that might go is James is the one. It's like, well, he didn't heed the warning and therefore he paid the cost.
Right.
But getting the guy who did flag everyone to pay the cost is a whole other emotional damage. Like,
yes.
That's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Yeah. And then, a question to you. So I think in a lot of stories like this, then the, if a story like this happens and you've got, the Niki character who gets hurt basically because of James. I mean, let's be honest. And then at the end, James says, I feel like it was my fault, whatever. Which was a nice moment, but James never changed. He never grew. He might have, like, in the movie, he beat up the jerk who asked him the question, that terrible question about his wife, not staying with him because he's ugly now or deformed. James beat him up and stuff, so he was kind of defending Niki a little bit, and but he never changed. He stayed the same. And I think that was important because I think in real life that was what happened. At least that's the way that they portray it happening, right? So he just partied too hard and never got back to where he was, but that's interesting to stay with that, because in a lot of stories it would be now James has changed and they're friends and they compete for, they continue competing or what together or something against each other. And I guess that kind of happens, but not really, because then he retires a few years later and he can't
I think you're right. I mean, I don't see any change in him either. Like, I think you're absolutely right. And I don't know the best way to say this because it's going to sound kind of shitty on his face, but like, maybe that's also why he dies. Like, the fact that he never changed his life, I think that's a bit of the implication, even if they're not super leaning into it, because there's a respect there. There's an adoration, that Niki has with him, but acknowledging that Niki's still alive and he did change, is an interesting, maybe something that we're supposed to think about. Like, does it matter? Did one thing influence the other? In this game of degrees, like, that's what Niki says every time. It's like, I accept a 20% chance of risk, not 1% more. Right. And for him, that's a line that, seems like he finished his career, and then some, and James didn't. So maybe it's a cautionary note to other risk takers to be like, find your acceptable level of risk and stop there. Never go above that. Because Niki did, and it cost him, being caught on fire, and he stopped doing that and he got to finish his career. So I don't know. Good question. It's a fascinating aspect of James's character to not change.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, we can clearly see Niki does. He lets the championship go. All he had to do probably was finish, and he would have won the championship. He didn't even have to win.
Right. Exactly. He
1 point.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, in a world where you need your characters to grow, honestly, I mean, I want to say that neither of them did, because they stayed themselves, true to themselves the entire time. But I feel like if anybody did grow, it would be Niki, right?
Yeah.
Or did he? I don't know. Maybe I just like him at the end the most.
Maybe so, yeah.
You brought that up, a really interesting thing up at the beginning, which was, who do we like the most? We keep flip-flopping, Niki's got the upper hand here, now James has the upper hand here, or that was a really good comeback, or I really identify with James here because he's getting all the girls and I want to be like that, and then Niki here because Niki is he's thinking about the future, and he's like, and he's really in it, and he knows the car and everything. And that beautiful humanizing moment of when he's driving the car, when the car breaks down in Italy with his wife, and he's driving those other guy's car, and she asks him to go fast, and he does. You finally see joy on his face too when driving, because you don't really see any joy on his face. He's very numbers. But it's just an interesting thought of like, do either of them really grow, or do they stay themselves? Maybe the one you see growing is the one that you really identify with or you like the most. I have no idea. I don't know.
No, that's a good point. Like, maybe it's not that they grow. Maybe it's that they become even more true to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because Niki is just like, I told myself I was going to do X, and now I'm going to do X. James was like, I'm going to enjoy this so much that I never even race again. Like, maybe that's what really happens here. They just become even more of who they are.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool too.
I think so.
The only other question for you, what did you think about the music? This is another Hans Zimmer special.
So good, man. So I knew, I didn't even know that he scored it, but I knew from the main theme. I was like, this is Hans. I know it's Hans.
Our guy worked on this too, Raul. He's uncredited, but yeah, he touched this one. And there was this at the end, the final race, whenever James Hunt is trying to get over the line, they use like this high-end engine revving sound as an instrument, and it becomes this like and it's just so high, and it's just like, whoa, this is cool. And it starts to mesh really nicely with his engine itself. It's so dope. The other thing, I don't know, this might just be me, but I swear I got some serious Game of Thrones vibes from the score. That I'm like, I wonder if Thrones started to like get it a little bit inspired by what Hans was doing and like ripped it into their stuff, because I would be, or maybe it was just in the ether. Like, you never want to like accuse anybody, but the influence sounds there, one way or the other. I would think Hans would be the trendsetter here, but maybe that's just because he's the Titan in the room.
I mean, like we mentioned at the beginning, influence, right? There's nothing against Game of Thrones influencing, the music of Rush. Why not? I don't, that's different than theft, and that definitely didn't happen here. And I don't think that you think that, but I think that, of course, it was like the biggest show of the decade. So the theme was one of the biggest themes of the decade. And anybody who lived through that decade would instantly be able to identify it. Dun, 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 So I could see that affecting it. Sure.
Yeah, for me, I think it was like the Reigns of Castamere, which is, I think in season 3. I was hearing that and here, and I'm like, I feel like this came out before that. And so I feel like maybe they were hearing what Hans was doing in Rush and was just like, we can build on that. Or not maybe explicitly to that degree. I don't know. But there was another track in there that felt analogous to something else, and I couldn't put my finger on where it was. I don't know, but Hans is always just, trying things.
He has a sound too.
Yeah.
Or like, maybe it's not a sound, maybe it's just style. He has a style.
Yeah, a style. And
that identifies him. And so maybe what you're hearing is like, maybe he's influencing himself. Maybe it's like the Inception, which is on the nose, right? Because he did that one too. Right. It's the Inception of scoring, right? Where he's influencing himself on other projects, which probably happens. That would be a good question to ask Raul, about that kind of stuff. But yeah, no, good spot there.
Oh man,
I didn't hear that, but I love it. I think it's brilliant.
Good stuff. Nice. Final thoughts, man.
I really enjoyed it. I think this is great movie. I mean, if we could talk about Ron Howard really quickly. I mean, I think he's in that category of filmmaker for me that is, when he hits, and I don't really remember the misses. And, unless you remind me, you're like, oh, I did this movie. I'm like, oh yeah. But when he hits, it's, wow, that was insane. Apollo 13, like and other, he's got so many, but he did such a great job in this movie. I mean, the other thing we didn't talk about too is the pacing. When you talk and the editing, I mean, you mentioned the editing in that one scene where Niki gets hurt, but the editing throughout the entire film is just so wonderfully done. We don't hang in moments too long, but we hang when we need to. The beats are hit. We switch for scenes when we feel like the scene is done. We go to another scene, sometimes a little too quick. I agree with you on the scene where you jumps into the marriage. We just jumped there. It was a little like, oh my God, where are we? We just lost how many? Did we lose a year, a week, a month, 7 months? Like, I have no idea. That was the reason why I felt a little off there, because I just didn't know how much time had passed. But for the most part, 99% of this, like the editing is so strong, so good, which I think in a lot of racing films, it has to be. You don't go into a racing film or a car film without knowing you've got a great editor, and a great director who's going to get all of those shots that you need for your great editor. You've got to have that. It's not like you're doing a rom-com or you're doing a drama, where we could live in one shot for a good, minute. No, we need to be cutting a lot. And he does such a good job of that. And so Ron, I mean, hats off, fantastic,
dude. Yeah, that guy, I agree, man. Like, whenever he's on, he's epic. He is just epic, and he's what we think about. Like, I feel like Spielberg gets mentioned more because he's Spielberg and he was so early in the game. But whenever you start really thinking about what do we want from a big budget blockbuster film, Ron Howard's as good as anyone else, man. He's as good as Spielberg. I think the real question is what's tickling his fancy? Like, when is he interested in that kind of project? And then you'll get that, you know. But that's kind of the other cool thing about him is like he doesn't need everything to be this massive thing. He's very interested in small stories, and he can tell those as well as any others too. Like Frost Nixon, incredible story, great movie, and gripping as this, just as gripping, and it's about an interview. And I love that he's not afraid to go and just step in and play in all these different universes and not make it bigger than it needs to be. He's going to the story. He's not making the story come to him. And I feel like that's what Spielberg does. He makes the story come to him. He's like, okay, this is a cool story, but how can we make it more Spielberg? And I feel like Ron Howard says, this is a great story. What do I need to tell it to the maximum impact? And different styles. And I love him for it. And so hopefully we'll get a lot more films out of him yet. Nice. Good point, man. All of that. The editing, having a great editor on your side, 100%. God, this isn't Notting Hill. You really need someone who's going to get into the weeds.
You're right. It's not.
What are you going to recommend this week?
This week I'm going to recommend a film. I believe it's streaming. Yeah, it's streaming on Netflix called Senna, which is another racing film. It's a documentary film from it was 2011, 2010, something like that. Great. It's a documentary, but it's not like a documentary. It's a film. It really well shot. Won a bunch of awards when it came out, I believe, and it's just fantastic. It's another good example of good editing, good lighting, good directing, good acting. Cinematography is fantastic in it. Really, really beautifully done. And it's streaming, so you don't have to pay anything to watch it. So
nice. Oh, I'm stuck, man. I have 4 that I'm like, I gotta pick from.
Come on, break it down.
I am gonna go with 13 Lives. So this is another Ron Howard film. It's excellent. I think our buddy Joe Howes recommended this one to me, and I saw it streaming on Amazon Prime, so it might still be there, but it's just gripping. It's Viggo Mortensen, and it's that story. It's another biopic, a story based on real events about those kids in, I think it's Malaysia, who get stuck in the cave and they have to mount a rescue mission. And my God, like Ron Howard can tell a story based on real events, maybe better than anyone. The more I think about Apollo 13, Rush, 13 Lives, like he is just amazing. And that movie is so gripping, and it'll leave you breathless. So if you enjoyed Rush and you want another story that's going to put you through the paces, 13 Lives, bro. It's surprising that no one's really talked about that movie. And that I didn't even, catch it. So
what year did it come out?
To Joe. 2022. It's recent.
What?
Yeah.
How have I not even heard of this?
I know.
Oh my God. Okay. Why is Ron Howard so under the radar? How can you make such good films and then just be so under the radar? Is he really in the shadow of Spielberg? Is that why? And Scorsese, who, I know they're masters, but he's right up there, man. He
is up there. It's not right. I'll say that. So yeah, go check that out. And I'm realizing he's got another film out this year called Eden. I need to go see that. I don't know if it's already out or what, but I'm Googling that. So 13 Lives, go check that out. And hat tip to Uva for recommending and requesting this one. This was a listener request, so appreciate you, buddy. All the way from Germany. Your fellow, we were joking beforehand, like, oh, it's funny that Uwe requested, a film about an Austrian. So all our Dutch friends, I guess, I don't know. I'm so bad with languages and I can't even pronounce the name of the track, so forgive us. But appreciate you, man. Really love hearing from you. And so hopefully you enjoyed this episode. And if you stay tuned for next week, we'll be going even more off the grid. We'll go down to Brazil and check out City of God. This one's been in the wings for a while. And so I'm excited to see what we pull out of this. It's intense. And set off a Brazil, fest of like great movies coming out of the South. And so City of God, stay tuned for that next week. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, subscribe, drop us a review, leave us a note, if there's something you want us to cover. And if you want to talk about this episode in particular, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/rush.
And our quote of the day, which sorry, 1 second, I just closed it. There you go. Our quote of the day is from Mario Andretti. I adore this quote. This quote is like just life quote in general. It's so good, so good. And I love that Andretti is in this film. They talk about Andretti. He's not like in it, but they mention his name.
His car's in there. Yeah.
So it just makes it reminds you that this is a real story, or based on a real story. If everything seems under control, you're just not going fast enough. That is so good. I love it so much. That's such a good quote, just in general of your life. It's so good.
Right? Like we need to remember that. Like right now, I feel like my life is a little too under control, and maybe I need to push the gas a little bit more.
Yeah.
Like what is there to lose? Like at the end of the day, we're here, we're alive in the universe. It's all house money. Let's fucking go, man.
Wow, can we have that quote for a West quote next week? We're here in the universe, it's all house money, let's fucking go, man. Oh, I love it. Fantastic. Great. One of my favorite quotes. I feel like I've been saying that every week, but yeah, thank you so much, Uwe, for the recommendation. I adore this film. I think it's really, really great. If you had a good time, please subscribe, review us wherever you get your podcasts. It all helps a lot. If there's a film you'd like to see us pick apart and talk about, please let us know. Who knows? Maybe we'll cover it one day. Until next time, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.